everybody, this is Jennifer. Welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be reviewing 3 of my favorite books of all time. They are clearly 5-star reviews, but I beg you to just bear with me because I'm not I don't have rose-colored glasses about them. There are specific reasons why I really enjoy them. I know they're not perfect, but they're still like my favorites. So you will get what I feel is a honest review out of me, but in order to avoid issues, I'm gonna tag this as more of a book discussion than a straight up review because let's just be honest, it's really hard to be objective about your favorite things. So yeah, first one I read, this is like the first part of a 2-part series because I'm going to be rereading and reviewing the entire series, and this will be the first half, and then the second half will come in August after I've read the last 2, the last full-length novel, the last novella, and the 2 short story collections I'm including. So in this video is Liquor, The Value of X, and Prime. These are all by Poppy Z. Brite. Poppy Z. Brite is a New Orleans author. The last published novel was in 2006, and it's about 2 lifelong friends and boyfriends who open a restaurant in New Orleans based entirely on the concept of every dish having liquor in it. And to that end, I decided it would be totally inappropriate for me to review these without a beverage. This has, I'm just gonna be honest, it's weak. It's weak as a newborn kitten, but what it has in it is some gin, a splash of peach schnapps, a can of seltzer water, and some lime. So that is what I'm having while I'm reviewing this. I will not be constantly drinking on the video, but you should know this is what I'm doing during editing. So, all right. I am going to be filming once, but I'm going to be editing twice, and I'm going to be editing a short version and a long version. You'll know in the description which version is which, but the short version will not have extended discussions about each individual book. It'll just be my impressions of the series overall, well, the first half of the series overall. And then the longer version will have more in-depth discussions about the books. Both of them should be spoiler-free, and if I can't, I will say something. All right, so let's get moving. Okay, so a quick word about the formatting of this. It's been like 2 years since I've done a full-on review video, so I wanted to have some kind of structure to this. So basically what is going to happen is, I don't know if any of y'all saw it, but about a year ago, judging last year's BookTube prize, Shawn the Book Maniac put out a video discussing his methodology for his rankings in one of the rounds. And I'm gonna link that video below. And he was going off Nancy Pearl's Book Lust book, talking about the 4 doors of I think that it's the 4 doors to reading, and it goes story, character, setting, and language. I am using those to structure my review. Now, I'm not going to go necessarily in that order, but I am going to start with the area that I think is the strongest and work my way down. That way, if I have, critiques, and I do, like I said, I think it's nearly impossible to be objective, especially about your favorites. But I am aware that there are some, critiques you can make. So I'm going to bring those up. Let's just say that my purpose with this video is to give a clear view of this series so you can decide whether it's for you or not. Yeah, these books are listed as general fiction, and I'd say that's mostly accurate. There does seem to be little hints of like mystery and intrigue, so that might be useful for you to know. They're especially in the larger, well, especially in the full-length novels, not so much in the novellas, there is elements of mystery and intrigue. So let's just go ahead and go over like the basic plot summaries of each of these books. I started with Liquor. If you check on Goodreads, it's gonna have the value of X as #1, but I know it's been almost 20 years. I don't believe this actually came out before this. This is a prequel. So I would say this is 1 and this is 0.5, I would not say this is book #1 and this is book 2. This is book 1, this is 0.5. The way they do prequels and all that, it's a prequel novella, so I'd go 0.5. And then this is full-length novel #2. So Liquor is about two friends, Ricky and G-Man, and they've been together, they've been friends since 4th grade, and they've been boyfriends pretty much since they were 16. And they're cooks in New Orleans, and they get fired from their job at this place called Tequila Town for drinking a beer on the job. So one morning they're like drinking orange juice and vodkas in the park in New Orleans, and Ricky comes up with this idea about having a restaurant with liquor in every dish, right? And so that just kind of sits there, and then they go and they get their jobs, and they end up working for this man who hooks them up with this restaurateur who is, he's a chef owner of several restaurants, and he's pretty famous in the New Orleans area, called Lenny Duveteau, and he decides to bankroll Ricky's restaurant idea. And this is about them deciding if they're going to do business with Lenny, which they do. I mean, and they get their restaurant started. In the meantime, what they deal with is, one, crazy bosses trying to pay the rent as cooks who don't get that much money. And yeah, basically this is basically just the story of them getting their restaurant going. And it goes into detail. It goes into some, like, not minute detail, that would be like a snooze fest, but it goes into some good detail about the workings of a kitchen and getting a restaurant opened, specifically in New Orleans. And the value of X is a prequel, of course. This starts when they're in they're in their junior year of high school, and they've been friends since, the 4th grade, and they're suddenly having feelings for each other. That's not friends, it's more than friends. And so this is how they deal with that, and how they deal with their families who are not happy with it. This takes place, I believe, in 1990. And what happens when Ricky gets the opportunity to go to school at the Culinary Institute of America in upstate New York, right? Which is pretty much given to him as a way to get him away from Gary, as G-Man's known. So that is what this book is about. And Prime takes place, I think, a year to a year and a half after Liquor. It's after the restaurant opens. Something happens where the local district attorney has it out for Lenny, who is their business partner and their mentor, pretty much. And he gets his son to write a bad review of Liquor, and it causes them to think about maybe there are drawbacks to having Lenny as a business partner. So Ricky starts taking consulting jobs, and he has to go to Dallas for one, and this is what happens around that situation. Now I'm going to go into the 4 elements I discussed earlier in the order I think they are the strongest to the weakest. The first part is going to be setting. The second part is going to be language, and I also titled this writing style, story, and then characters. So New Orleans is the setting for the most part, and then the restaurant world. They end up in Dallas, they end up in New York at some places, but New Orleans and the restaurant world in New Orleans are the absolute, like, they are absolute in this story. And it's very much, this is very much a situation where the location is a character in the story. They inform the plot, they inform the characters. New Orleans and the restaurant world inform almost every single part of these 3 books, except, you know, in The Value of X, where it deals mostly with their home life and their parents and stuff like that. And school, because they're 16 when it starts. And so it's written in very vivid terms, and it's written very convincingly. You know from it that this is a place that the author knows and the author loves. And this is also happening pre-Katrina. If you're looking for post-Katrina, the author has not written since the last, well, hasn't written like a full-length novel since the last book in this series, and the last set of short stories, which is Antediluvian Tales. So this does represent pre-Katrina New Orleans. You're not going to get anything of post-Katrina New Orleans in here. But the story would not be the same at all without the setting. And so that is absolute the strongest part of these books. Next up, which I really loved, and for some reason I didn't really know why, but I felt like the writing style and the language was a major part of why I love these books. Right. So, for one, when it comes to story structure, this is pretty normal. As far as sentence structure, it does skip POVs, but it doesn't skip like timelines or anything like that, which always gets on my nerves. On a sentence by sentence level, I think the sentence structure is very good. It's not short, staccato, or anything like that, and it's not overly long. It does not detract at all. What I think really stands out as far as the writing is concerned is the dialogue. What I can say is it's very grounded in realism. The characters have real problems. The stories are well researched, and there's just not anything like purpley about the prose, except there is interesting word choice occasionally, and that's just part of the things that I like about it. Yeah, so I thought the writing was really strong in the books. When it comes to story, Like, I feel like the writing style and the story were like on even footing. It's just, I think the dialogue is just so good here that I had to give that the leg up. But the stories, they feel fully formed. They have a good beginning, middle, and end. I do think Liquor kind of drags in the middle a bit. Like, there's this whole chapter talking about restaurants that opened and closed in the time that Ricky and G-Man are getting their restaurants started, which I think maybe didn't need a whole chapter. Maybe could have used, like, maybe could have worked on a paragraph or something. I don't know. But I do feel like it kind of drags a little bit in the middle. So when it comes to the story structure, the story is number one, right? And the themes fit into the story. Nothing feels shoehorned in. So it's not a story wrapped around themes. It's the story first and then themes that deal naturally with the subject matter. You know, dealing with crappy bosses, being on your feet for 12 hours straight and having to take the bus home. You know, trying to make rent. So I feel like all the stories have successful setups and conclusions. I will say that the endings, now this might be a function of me having read them so many times. It may not be so obvious when you read through them the first time. I do feel like the endings can get a bit formulaic, which means, one, Ricky getting to major drama with somebody who has a fixation on him, and G-Man having to pick up the pieces, kind of like that. But I don't think that's a major issue because the stories are different enough, right? So I put characters last, and I put it like that for a reason. While I think the characters are good, I think they lack growth. Especially, like, they all grow a little. You have to when you're making such a major career shift and you're starting to take take independence. It kind of has to be. But I think in general, Ricky goes through the most. G-Man goes through some, but he's more himself at the beginning, right? So he has less growing to do, except that he has to be in charge. He has to be the second in command instead of just being somebody in an assembly line of cooks, right? But in general, I do find they're slightly lacking in growth. But the characters are absolutely believable. And even the ones who are slightly unbelievable are believable by New Orleans standards, right? Another issue I would say is if you're looking for female representation in books, you're not going to get it in this series. You're just not. They have to deal with their mothers, especially in the second book. And there's a female bartender and then a female cook in the second full-length book, Prime. But this is a dude's world, basically. Especially when the book was being written. It's less so now. And so I don't think this would be quite so good. Well, if these novels were being written now, and they're not, so I'm not holding them to this standard, but if they were being written now, the lack of believable female characters in the restaurant world would be an issue. Because it's less of an issue, because that area is being more diversified all the time. And more women cooks are being acknowledged, right? So that would be an issue. I can't have a discussion about characters without bringing up Lenny, right? So Lenny is a major character in all the full-length books. So under this review discussion thing, Liquor and Prime. And as much as I love Ricky and G-Man, Lenny is the most interesting character in the series. Just full stop. And he doesn't have any growth either, but I kind of love him the way he is, so I'm fine with that. Let's just say it's not that his character, he grows, because the stories aren't about him, but more of his character as it is illuminated the further you go. And that's what I like. So the reason why I consider him the most interesting character is he creates the most tension in the reader. And the way I'll say that is because, one, he's giving our main characters the ability to make their dreams, right? So it's a score in his book. Well, the way he does it is a bit skeevy. The thing about Lenny is he is a bit skeevy, right? But he's the kind of skeevy you kind of love, because he's not mean-spirited, right? He's not, if you don't look too closely at the details, he's not that bad of a guy. But he also creates most of the tension, especially in the first book, between Ricky and G-Man, because they have very different reactions to what he does to make their restaurant a reality. So that creates tension between them. And in Prime, what happens is he is actually the catalyst for most of the plot, right? Which is what makes it so imperative that Ricky and G-Man learn to become independent of him, despite his, being a fairly stand-up mentor to them, right? Because even if he's, he's mostly a good guy, he's not, eventually there are going to be consequences. And they want to get ahead of that. Lenny provides moral ambiguity in every book that he's in. And I kind of love him for that. So it's like they know they have to go in business with him in order to get what they want. But they're kind of like, all right, fine, if I have to. It's the cost of doing business in New Orleans, dealing with Lenny. All right, so yes, that was my book discussion / review of the first 3 books in the Liquor / Ricky and G-Man series. If you have any discussion points, or if you've read the book and you have comments you want to make, please leave them in the comment section below. Yeah, that is it. I will see you again soon for some other content. Bye.